Welcome to my world, where you will experience an atmosphere of love, relevant subjects, and motivation. So let's talk about things that matter. What matters to you matters to me. Well, hello my friends. Welcome to the Brother Henry and You Show. I have a very exciting series I want to come and share with you for the next few weeks. And I want to come and just talk to you about toxic masculinity. I understand it's not a popular subject. I also understand it's not something that many people talk about, so let's face it. But how many know that what we shove under the rug and what we ignore could be the very thing that could be helpful to us in our lives? So I've been really looking forward with such anticipation to be here with you today to talk to you about this subject. I believe it's a relevant subject. I believe it's something that needs not only to be discussed, but also worth a discussion. So I appreciate you for watching, and I want to ask you to share this video because I believe it's going to help so many men out there today. So I want to address a subject that I've been wanting to address for a while now, for quite some time, and that is this thing called toxic masculinity. Now, many people have their own personal ideal of what masculinity is. And I respect how some may view masculinity. However, there's so much more to masculinity that many of us may not even be aware of, and that many people also have failed to understand. So let's start out with this first. What is toxic masculinity? You're hearing that word, many of you probably for the first time, and you're like, what is toxic masculinity? Well, let me give you the definition. The concept of toxic masculinity is used in psychology and media discussions of masculinity to refer to a certain cultural norms that are associated with harm to society and to men themselves. Traditional stereotypes of men as socially dominant, along with related traits such as homophobia, can be considered toxic due to to their promotion of violence, including sexual assault, domestic violence, and etc. The word masculinity simply means maleness, manliness, vigor, or toughness. So when you think of the word masculinity, that's what it means. Maleness, manliness, vigor, or toughness. Or sometimes when you think of a man, what comes to your mind? Vigorness, toughness. I'm manly. That's what masculinity is. So now that we know what toxic masculinity is, let us now talk about when does masculinity start? Is there a beginning stage to this thing called masculinity? Masculine qualities and roles are considered typical of, appropriate for, and expected of boys and men. The word itself, according to my research, received increased attention during the late 1980s and the early 1990s. But many of us have been trained since childhood what masculinity is, which oftentimes many of us have never fulfilled. As a child, I couldn't really understand it when I was taught. I can remember as a child, I couldn't really understand what masculinity really was or what it was all about. But I was taught And I'm talking about myself, even as a little boy, I was taught that, okay, you are a man. Now, I've been told this, but I was a little boy at the time. So in my mind, I didn't fully understand what it was. I didn't fully understand what it meant. So I want you to understand, I've been told this by grown adults, grown men, telling this to a little Henry, a little boy. So they told me that this is what masculinity is. You will be a man one day, but you need to start displaying these traits right now of masculinity, because that's what you are. You need to be tough. I'm telling you what I was told. You may be another guy that's watching, you may have been told different. I've been told that I need to be tough, that I need to be dominant. I was also told that you don't need to cry. I found out later that that's not true, because I love to cry. I'm one of the most sensitive, emotional, loving people that you'll ever meet. I was told that as a man, that I need to take charge. How many of you guys that are watching out there have been told that? Men take charge. With a whole lot of other roles that at the time was unrealistic to me. Again, I didn't understand all of this at that time. I understand it more today than I did years ago. It was a lot later in my life till I realized, and also not only did I realize it, but I started to understand it a little bit better when I had got a clearer picture of not only what masculinity was, but also what toxic masculinity was. Here's a quote that I like. By far the worst thing we do to males, by making them feel that they have to be hard, is that we leave them with very fragile egos. That comes from toxic masculinity. Men have to be hard. Men have to be tough. Men have to take charge. Men have to be dominant. And we know and we understand that that is so far from the truth. And I love that quote because it is true. And it not only does it relate to me, it relates to many of us. And just because you are a man doesn't mean you have to be hard. Who determines or decides what it means to be masculine? That's a question I want to ask you today that are watching. Who decides that? Or what it means to be a real man? Several have created many traits and many roles throughout the years of what it means to be a man. So can I share them with you? I would love to share them with you. So it has been taught that to fit in the man box of toxic masculinity, a real man must live by a particular set of rules, and not only rules, but beliefs. And they must be fulfilled, because if not, you're not considered a real man. I hope you guys are understanding this. What does that even mean, by the way? We're going to talk about that in a second. So some of those particular sets of beliefs that many men have been taught to be is to suffer in silence. In other words, if something is wrong with you, we've been taught to bottle that up. It's not manly to share your emotions. Lack of emotions, that's number 3. It's not manly to talk about things that's bothering you. We men have been taught to put up a wall. And I've done this myself. I still struggle with my masculinity today, partly because of what I was taught growing up. You keep all that stuff inside and don't even understand that when you do that, all it's doing is tormenting you on the inside where you're not able to freely live out your manhood in freedom. We've been taught in that man box of toxic masculinity that we have to be tough. Men have to be tough. We've been taught or programmed that men never lose. Well, that's in a game or a fight or whatever the scenario may be. That if you are a man, you cannot lose. You cannot lose. And we know that that's also unrealistic because in this world, you will lose, you will win. Number 5, we've been taught that don't depend on anyone. God forbid if you need help. You're a man asking for help. You're a man and you're lacking in something and you need help. God forbid, because men have been taught, don't ask for help. Don't depend on anybody. You are to take charge. That's number 6. Men ought to take charge. They ought to be the front runner. Number 7, fix all problems. I don't know if you know this, especially if you're a woman that you're watching, how many times we've been in relationships, and I've been here a time or two, where the woman goes to her boyfriend or her husband, and there is an issue. There is a problem. Well, as a man, because how many know that a man's mind and a woman's mind operates differently? In a woman's mind, I just want him to listen to me. I just need him to hear me out, so to speak. I just need him to just pay attention to what I'm saying, or at least just to be there. But in the mind of a man, they perceive that as an issue. I've learned one thing, even in being in relationships, that sometimes when you're presented with something, it doesn't always necessarily mean something has to be fixed. But that's the way our masculinity works. Or at least that's the way we've been taught. Men are fixers. And that's by nature. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just know from personal experience that oftentimes there are times where things don't really need to be fixed. Sometimes people just want to be loved. Sometimes people just want to be heard. But we've been taught that. It's a part of masculinity. We've been taught men fix everything. Men fix all the problems. We've been taught that men, as a man, you can never be a victim. That is the biggest lie I've ever heard, because you can be a victim. And also we've been taught that you need to be a man. You need to be a man. Now, this is a question that I often ask when I hear, especially women say, and sometimes I even hear men say, but that's very rare. But typically I hear women say that you need to be a real man. You're not a man. A real man would do this. A real man would do that. Well, let me challenge you right quick. And toxic can work on both spectrums. It's not just with males. Females can deal with toxic things as well. So let me challenge you right quick who have that line of thinking. If one fails to meet your expectations of what a real man is, does that then disqualifies him from being a real man or a man at all? If you're watching, you're saying, and you're one of the ones, well, he's not a real man. A real man would do this. A real man would do that. Well, what if he don't meet your expectations? What does a real man even look like to you? Oh man, I hope I'm helping somebody today. What would it be like for me to say, well, that's not a real woman. A real woman wouldn't act that way. A real woman wouldn't do this. A real woman wouldn't do that. I have just created a stereotype. We're not going to talk about those today. We'll get into those next week. I created a stereotype on a whole gender based on what I think or assume what a woman should be or shouldn't be. How many get what I'm saying? So there is really no such thing as a real man. Men are just men. Women are just women. There's no such thing. And not only is there no such thing as a real man, there's no such thing as a real woman. You're just a woman. But society as a whole have created this mindset, and unfortunately, it's a mindset that many people have adapted to. So boys have been taught at a young age, and I'm talking about me. I've been taught, boys have been taught to be aggressive and be strong at all costs. You cannot show, I'm talking about as a man, you cannot show any sign of weakness. Toxic masculinity behaviors occurs when men feel they need to defend or assert this unhealthy ideal of masculinity. And that's what makes it toxic, is when you adhere or pretty much adopt those beliefs. Masculinity in itself is not a bad thing. There are some good qualities to masculinity, and we'll talk about those here in a little bit. But what makes masculinity toxic is when we start to believe certain ideals and beliefs, and we try to live and fulfill those, which oftentimes ends up as an epic failure. So even men have accepted the ideal of toxic masculinity. We all know that anything that's toxic, and that word toxic means venomous or something that's dangerous, even if it's an ideal that should not even be embraced. The real problem with toxic masculinity is that it assumes that there is only one way, watch this, of being a man. There's only one way. If you're going to be a man, a real man, that is, as some of y'all say, you got to suffer in silence. You got to be tough. You can't cry. You got to lack emotion. You got to be a man. You got to be tough. You can't show sign of weakness. You got to be strong. This is toxic, folks. So let me make something clear. I am not saying men are toxic, even though some men are toxic. But sometimes men do adapt to or adhere to toxic behaviors, which is, but not limited to, sexual aggression towards women. We see this happens all the time. Sometimes it happens in the workplace. It happens. Not displaying emotions. Not engaging. Not supportive of women. A lot of toxic men are not supportive of women at all. Destructive and violent. These things happen. So once again, many men have been taught to be this way. It's been programmed in their minds, been indoctrinated within their thinking. So here's another good question. How can toxic masculinity be addressed? How do we address this in an appropriate and an effective way? In order to address the problem of toxic masculinity, it must be first recognized as a problem. How many of you understand that? How many know that you can't really fix a problem until you first recognize that there is a problem? And once you recognize that, hey, I am adhering to some toxic masculinity, I think I need to reevaluate or challenge some of the things I've been taught, even as a child, of what a man is. Because let me tell you something. If you don't do that, it could damage your life. It could ruin relationships because we haven't dealt with it at hand. Masculinity in itself, as I said earlier, is not bad, as there can be good qualities that can come from it, such as loyalty. He's loyal. He's a hard worker. He appreciates you, and he makes you happy. And those are just a few. But you get my point. There are some good qualities that can come from masculinity, and there are some bad ones that can come from masculinity that can make toxic masculinity toxic, dangerous, venomous. No one is perfect. I get that. But always remember, real masculinity is no masculinity. Oh boy, that's deep. Real masculinity is no masculinity. And you know what that means? That means just live your life authentically, be good to yourself, and be good to others. Real masculinity is no masculinity. It's where you reach a place where you're not putting labels on people, you're not living by that toxic identity. You've moved beyond that. You've graduated beyond that. Did you enjoy that today? I enjoyed it. I learned quite a few things myself, even in preparing this for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Share this with your friends. Join me next week. We will be talking about breaking masculine stereotypes. Oh, don't we hear them all the time? And I'm looking forward to being with you next week as we talk about that.
Hi, if you like what you're seeing today, be sure to connect with Brother Henry at www.facebook.com/The Brother Henry and You Show. And also be sure to check out and subscribe to his YouTube channel, which is www.youtube.com/Henry Harris 100. We hope that this has been a blessing to you, and we hope to hear from you soon. Keep watching, because what matters to you matters to Brother Henry.